The Denver Broncos barely survive in one of the craziest Monday Night Football games we'll see all season. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. Make sure that you listen to every episode of Locked On NFL on Amazon Music. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today, as I am every Tuesday, by Locked On NFL expert Lauren Cox. On today's episode, we're going to get some on-the-ground information about where the Chicago Bears go from here. Also, Trevor Lawrence should sit the rest of the season for the Jacksonville Jaguars, but we'll start with this crazy Monday Night Football game between the Browns and the Broncos. Before we dive in, thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the final third of the NFL season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lauren, the Denver Broncos barely survive the Cleveland Browns.
And a vintage Jameis Winston performance is exactly what keeps you on the edge of your seat.
100%. And my guy, Sayer Benninger from Locked On Broncos, talked about this crazy victory in Denver.
Was that the best game of the year? Broncos country. Well, it tastes a little bit sweeter because the team won. The Denver Broncos beat the Cleveland Browns on Monday Night Football in Week 13, 41-32, in a critical game for the Broncos as they move to 8-5. The storyline in this game, the Broncos welcomed the Cleveland Browns to town on Monday Night Football, but they were a little too welcoming as the Browns threw for 500 plus yards. Jerry Jeudy had the game of his life, but thankfully the Denver Broncos got a couple of interceptions off of Jameis Winston in the first half. Nick Bonito took one back, a pick six for the Denver Broncos defense. In the second half, in crunch time, clutch play, Jaquan McMillan with another pick six to put the Broncos up 9 points, and then Cody Barton sealed the deal with Jameis Winston's third interception of the night as the Broncos keep their playoff hopes very much alive after Week 13's matchup against the Cleveland Browns.
I mean, it really might have been the best game of the year. I mean, maybe not the highest level of football that you'll see all year, but just the constant huge plays. I mean, the 93-yard bomb to Marvin Mims, the 70-yard bomb to Jerry Jeudy, the defensive scores by the Broncos up and down the field all night long. I mean, Jerry Jeudy had the most yards of any wide receiver returning to play a former team in NFL history with 235. I mean, are the Broncos at 8-5 a team that you're really worried about making a deep postseason run? Probably not. I mean, they'll be competitive, but like at the end of the day, regardless of where these teams are headed, was just an incredibly entertaining football game.
Yeah, it feels like the Broncos are like a little bit ahead of schedule and like overachieving in regards of where they're supposed to be at this stage of the process. But like a game like this kind of reminds you both like how good they can be and also how close they are to losing to a 3-win Cleveland Browns team. You know what I mean? Like it took two Jameis Winston pick sixes to score enough points to outscore the Browns in this game. I mean, Jameis had a Cleveland Browns single game passing record, 497 passing yards. I mean, just an incredible performance to have that with the 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, 2 of which are pick six. I mean, it makes us kind of forget that Bo Nix threw a couple interceptions in that game as well. And, you know, the completion percentage there was a hit and miss because it was all boom or bust for both quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think that is, to me, you look at the Broncos and, you know, they're 8-5, and I've been a Broncos hater, certainly, and you got to give them their credit for that. But look at the teams that they beat. You know, they beat Tampa Bay in Week 3. That's probably their best win of the season. They beat the Jets. They beat the Raiders. They beat the Saints. They beat the Panthers. They beat the Falcons. They beat the Raiders. They beat the Browns. Like, they haven't beaten any good teams all year long. Like, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers truly are the only team with a winning record that they've beaten so far this year. The Falcons are 6-6, and who knows where they're going to go from here after their back-to-back losses. So you want to give the Broncos their credit, and I have been down on Sean Payton in the process, so I have to eat some crow on that as well. They're much better than I expected them to be. Bo Nix has made more plays than a lot of people expected, but do we think the Broncos are going to win a playoff game? Can the Broncos make a deep playoff run? I am just not convinced about that, regardless of how many wins they have. And then they play Indianapolis after their bye. Then they play the Chargers, the Bengals, the Chiefs. Again, maybe the Chiefs have things sewed up there. I mean, they could win like 11 games, and I just don't think that I'm going to trust them in the playoffs no matter what happens.
It's been fun to watch the bounce back for Vance Joseph on that side of the ball. Like, as much as everyone talks about Sean Payton doing such a great job with both, like, that defense is playing really well. I mean, sure, they gave a bunch of yards to Jameis Winston, but I mean, you grab the interceptions, the pick sixes, like that's more than enough of what they wanted to see. And like you look at their season so far, every loss has been by one score except for the loss to the Ravens. So I think you can look at that as a team and say, man, you know, they already have 8 wins and their losses have all been really close. That it feels like a team that could take that next step, you know, next year if the defense is playing well and the offense continues to grow with Bo Nix and he takes a step forward in year 2. Like you can see a nice bright future for Denver if things continue on this trajectory.
You know, I do want to say though, Broncos is the 7 seed going up against the Steelers in round 1. That could be interesting. Maybe I should give the Broncos more credit for that possibility. But quickly on the Browns here, the only takeaway that I have is they would have a much better record and be a much better team if they would have went with Jameis Winston earlier in the season. Even though he pulled the classic Jameis Winston, like you said, 4 touchdown passes, but also 3 interceptions. That's how you get to a 30-30 season like we saw from Winston in Tampa Bay, right? But the Browns are just clearly a much better football team with Jameis Winston at quarterback than Deshaun Watson. And it feels like everybody in the NFL ecosystem knew that except the Browns.
And it highlights like just how bad Deshaun Watson was.
Yes.
If Winston can, not that when we could have the Winston debate of like, okay, just how good is he or is he not? But like, he's clearly not a great quarterback. He might be a good quarterback, but he's not a great quarterback. And if he can come in and throw for almost 500 yards and 4 touchdowns against the second ranked Broncos defense, like they've actually been a really good defense this season. So if Winston can come in this system and get 200 plus yards for Judy and more, and Joker has a couple touchdowns, like how bad was Watson? I mean, just how terrible is he? If even Winston can have this kind of game for this team, man, they must have a really good ecosystem that even that quarterback couldn't take advantage of.
Yeah, Jameis Winston is like apple cider vinegar. Like, it's good for you, you know what I mean? Like, everybody says, you know, with the mother, it's so good. But at the same time, like, if you take enough apple cider vinegar, you're going to, like, puke. So, like, too much of it is a very bad thing, but it can also be it can be good for you as well. It's just hard to parse there. And so it's a rough analogy, but I'm sure anyone who's ever done a little apple cider vinegar in the morning knows exactly what I mean. But with that being said, we got to move away, talk about Trevor Lawrence, who got one of the most vicious hits of the NFL season. And it's probably best for Jacksonville just to sit Lawrence down for the rest of the season. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the most fun and the simplest way to play daily fantasy sports. That's why they have over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks makes daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you have to do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. I love Prize Picks. Again, it's super simple. All you do is pick 2 to 6 players and say whether they're going to do more or less than the Prize Picks projection. Think, Patrick Mahomes, 250 passing yards. Justin Jefferson, 83.5 receiving yards. Travis Kelce, 51.5 receiving yards. All you do is pick 2 to 6 players and say more or less. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download Prize Picks today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, Lauren, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about that wild Monday night football game between the Broncos and the Browns, but now we got to move forward to one of the more wild things that we saw throughout the weekend, and it was a brawl in the Houston Texans and Jacksonville Jaguars game after a dirty hit by Al-Shaair from the Houston Texans on Trevor Lawrence. Since then, Al-Shaair, to his credit, has apologized. We've gotten reports from people like Adam Schefter from ESPN that he's likely to be suspended. We just don't know how long. After a late hit on Tony Pollard in the previous week and some other questionable hits earlier this year from Al-Shaair, it kind of seems like that's what's necessary at this time, whether he apologized or not. But the real conversation is whether Trevor Lawrence should play the rest of the season. And it's my opinion that the Jacksonville Jaguars should sit him down for the rest of the year for multiple reasons. And my guy, Tony Wiggins, the barber who hosts the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL, seems like he shares my opinion there.
Trevor Lawrence has now gotten banged up. He came into the game possibly needing surgery on his non-throwing shoulder. I think he was trying to figure out if he could play through it. And then he got hit with this dirty hit yesterday, and now he went to concussion protocol and left the game. There's no reason to play him for the rest of the season. Whether he needs the surgery or not, there's nothing for him to prove this year, just to try to break this out. I just leave him on the sideline and let him rehab and let him figure out the schedule for surgery. Whatever we have to do, we need Trevor Lawrence come around April or May to be back learning a new playbook, hopefully, and getting going with a full off season to rest and get himself together, as opposed to putting him back out there in these meaningless games and it gives you a better chance to win those games, but not at the expense of hurting him in the future. So, in my opinion, he should be shut down.
I fully agree with Tony. As I was saying, it goes further than the concussion issue. It's the shoulder, too. I mean, Lawrence is just a couple weeks away from missing a couple of games. You add in the fact that it's probably better for the Jags to lose the rest of these games at this point. I mean, they're headed straight towards the number one pick in the draft, and whether they use that pick, whether they trade that pick for a team coming up for a quarterback, like, it's going to be better for the franchise moving forward with a new head coach and a new system if Trevor Lawrence is healthy and they get the best possible pick that they can.
Yeah, it just feels like if there's any question whatsoever about his health, if he's not 100% for every single reason, then there's no value in playing him. You got nothing to gain by winning any of these final 5 games. You're 2-10 anyway. You're out of the playoffs. You're out of the mix for anything. And we're like not that far removed from everyone wondering if Trevor Lawrence was washed up and wasn't good anymore because he had been battling through injuries, right? I mean, like we had all these questions about Trevor Lawrence. It's like, is he hurt? Is he doing too much? Like, what's going on here? And it seems like the answer was kind of like, yeah, when he's healthy, he's really good to go. But he was pushing through stuff that was holding him back quite a bit. So why even bother re-aggravating anything or risking anything? Like, if he was truly 100% healthy and good to go, then okay, you don't have to play scared and just sit him up for no real reason. But you have this excuse to sit him on a silver platter that no one's going to question. Are you tanking? Like, if you want to try and uphold the integrity stuff or whatever, like, are you tanking or are you just hiding your quarterback here? Like, no, he's very clearly injured. So just ride that out. No one's going to ask questions.
And with the severity of concussions, this is the guy who you just paid $250 million. I think it would be incredibly reckless to put him back out there in the back half of the season when you are eliminated from playoff contention. There's nothing that you can gain. And you can't even make the argument that it's like, well, you know, chemistry with his teammates and, you know, getting experience. And like, they're going to have a brand new head coach after the season. There's going to be an entire new thing. So not only, and this is something that Tony actually talks about in his episode of Locked On Jaguars as well, it's not only about keeping Trevor Lawrence from getting hurt even more and hurting himself long-term, it's about getting him as ready as possible for one of the most important off seasons in Jacksonville Jaguars history. So, like, it is from every single different possible angle, the right thing to do is to sit Trevor Lawrence here.
And don't you want to see a little bit of what Mac Jones can do? I mean, I know he's filled in a couple games, but like to like let him prepare week in and week out as the starter for the final 5 games. Not that you're going to like make him your starting quarterback or whatever, but you've kind of been sitting on this thing on the bench trying to rehab him and see if you can still pull a first round caliber quarterback out of that. Like, he played pretty well in the Texans game after Lawrence left. I know he
played better than Trevor Lawrence, my friend.
Yeah. I mean, that's worth testing it out over the final 5 games against some defenses that shouldn't be too tall of a task there. Titans, Jets, Raiders, Titans, Colts are the final 5 games there. Give him a shot. It's not like you got some nobody on the bench that you know you're definitely going to be screwed with. Like, see what Mac Jones has.
Yeah, 100%. And whether they bring him back as a long-term backup and a good option behind Trevor Lawrence, or whether he goes somewhere else on a decent contract to be a backup who has the potential to start, kind of like a Jameis Winston situation over the last few years, maybe a compensatory draft pick, and then you can get some compensation back for the trade that you made to land Mac Jones. That's also up in the air as well. So I think we're in agreement here that sitting Trevor Lawrence for the rest of the year, whether it's for the tank, whether it's for its long-term health, whether it's for preparation for next year, whether it's for Mac Jones, there are just so many different reasons why that's the right move. And speaking of players who are probably done for the season, Christian McCaffery going on IR after injuring his PCL against the Buffalo Bills. And my guys, the Locked On 49ers podcast, they know this is basically a lost season.
PCL injury for Christian McCaffrey. It's going to be at least 6 weeks for him. He's going on IR, which means that the 49ers aren't in the playoffs. His season is over.
Peacock, do you remember? I was like, you know what, Peacock? The vibes are just off a little bit this year. Just something wasn't sitting quite well with me. It was whether it was the Christian McCaffrey being out, the whole stuff with Brandon Ayuk. Maybe I'm tripping. This season starts and they have a great game against the New York Jets. And you're like, oh, okay, maybe I'm tripping. Maybe the vibes aren't quite down. But as we approach, kind of the back half of this season, I don't know if this season, from an injury standpoint, a coaching standpoint, and now it's like not just Christian McCaffrey's out. It's like, man, Jordan Mason, the guy who has ran very well, he's been battling injuries throughout this season. This is a disastrous season right now.
Lauren, I think that we spoke last week and we were both like, can we really give up on the 49ers just yet? Is it really, they're one game back. It's over now. It's over now. Their soul has been taken. They have too many injuries anyway. The Super Bowl hangover is real. And you know what else? The Madden curse is real because Christian McCaffrey was on Madden. And here we go again. We've seen it too many times.
Yeah, you feel bad for him with how much work he put in to try and get even back on the field. And then right away, I've seen a bunch of jokes on Twitter that, the European steroids in his knee wore out and then it just turned into a beef brisket on the field. But, it's tough because that team is fun to watch when they're good. And that if they could just be healthy, we know the potential there. Right? It's not like some hypothetical team that on paper, we really think, kind of like the Miami Dolphins were supposed to be and some of these other teams where it's like, man, yeah, this really should work. We just haven't been able to see it work. No, we've seen this work and we just know that it's not their fault that everyone's hurt in these key spots and these key players, but man, it's disappointing and it's frustrating. And I have to imagine Kyle Shanahan's kind of going through man, how does this kind of thing keep happening to me where every year Kyle Shanahan either has 12 wins or 5 wins and there's no middle ground.
Well, you know what? They probably just need a good reset, but there are a lot of questions going forward. Are they going to have to cut Deebo Samuel? Is Trent Williams come back? They're going to have to pay Brock Purdy. Is Christian McCaffrey ever going to be the same again? He's starting to wear down a little bit. Do they have the depth on the defensive line? There are just a lot of questions in San Francisco. They're going to be one of the more interesting teams to watch this offseason. But another team that's going to be interesting to watch this offseason, professional segue, folks, is the Chicago Bears. Who's going to be the Bears head coach? Should they have kept their GM around? We got the best person in the world to answer these questions. Laura Cox from Locked On Bears. Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the final third. It's sad to say that, but it's the truth. The final third of the NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get 150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So you get a hunch in the middle of a game. You can go check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same exact page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Lauren, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about that wild Monday Night Football game, Trevor Lawrence and Christian McCaffrey's injury situations. But now we got to talk about the Chicago Bears, who held a state of the franchise press conference kind of on Monday where Kevin Warren, I don't know his official title. You can inform me of that, but he's like the primary decision maker for the Bears. And then Ryan Poles, the general manager, was announced that he will be coming back in 2025, but they clearly have an opening at head coach. How do you feel, Lauren, about the Bears keeping Ryan Poles around as GM? How do you feel? What's your confidence level in Kevin Warren? And then who are you looking at as some potential coaching options for the Chicago Bears, who maybe we just continue to do this and we shouldn't have done it, but seem like they have a pretty good roster?
Well, and that's the argument for keeping the general manager, right? Is they do have a pretty good roster. They do have some pretty good players, and they have come within 3 points of beating all three of their divisional opponents in the best division in football because of the talent on their roster, and lose those games largely because of the coaches on the sideline. So, like,
yes,
the argument for the general manager to stay kind of writes itself there. You can point to and say, see,
right,
like my quarterback and my offense got us back into the game, and my defense kept us in that game, and our coach took us out of that game. So keep me in. I generally agree with that as a premise there. Like, I think Ryan Poles has certainly made mistakes, and the coaching decisions have probably been the biggest ones, but every GM makes mistakes. Show me the perfect general manager who doesn't make a mistake.
Right.
And, they don't exist. So I'm okay with Poles being back and getting another shot at the head coaching search. Kevin Warren's going to be a lot more involved this time. And where I'm weary there is that, like, step one of the coaching change is firing your head coach. And it feels like they kind of botched that by making Matt Eberflus do a press conference and then firing him an hour later. So it's like, if you can't even do the first step right, how am I supposed to trust you in the rest of the steps? I'm weary that, this is going to be.
Can I just say this about the press conference? I think the reality is that the reason that order of operations happened is because he was a moron at the press conference. I think that there was a logical possibility that he was not fired immediately, but because he went to the press conference and doubled down on his stupid decision, I think that made the owner, Kevin Warren, somebody go, oh my God, this guy is a moron. He just didn't admit he messed up. And I think the press conference probably had something to do with the firing, and that's why he wasn't fired before it. So not justifying it, but just logically thinking of reasons why that would happen.
Yeah, he definitely his post-game press conference on Thursday was reinforcing a lot of that stuff. The Bears decided they were going to sleep on it Thursday night and then make a decision Friday morning. Evidently, they started meeting around 7.
Yeah, that's their story.
And then they were meeting during the press conference. They were still having that conversation while Matt Eberflus was giving that press conference. They decided during the press, like while he was doing the press conference, that afterwards that they would make a change there. But okay, then move the press conference or have your meeting a little bit earlier so you can get it done before the press conference. I realize it's beside the point here. Like, they did Matt Eberflus dirty, and it signals to other coaching candidates like, hey, they didn't even fire guys right over there. Like, what am I for sure going to want to go work for those guys?
Yeah, that's a fair question to ask. But with that being said, it's still a pretty good opening. And who are some options that you would be interested in to beat the next coach of the Bears?
I mean, obviously everyone's going to talk about Ben Johnson of the Detroit Lions. There have been reports that he was interested in them last year and that he's still going to be interested in them. But I'll tell you what, interim Bears head coach Thomas Brown had his press conference right after the team president and general manager did. Thomas Brown talks like a head coach. Like, when he speaks, entering Friday, I thought his chances of being the Bears head coach, 5% maybe, but like, he's got something there. Like, if he's not going to be the Bears head coach, he might be somebody's head coach someday. He has a plan. He communicates clearly. He says, this is how we're going to do it. I'm not going to micromanage, but I have plans for how everything is going to go. Like, this is what our identity is going to be. This is how we're going to work as a team. Like, he just had all of his ducks in line that the GM and team president didn't even seem to have in line. Like, he just seems like he's built for this job. So I think Thomas Brown has a very legitimate shot over the last 5 games to win that coaching job and stick and take the interim title off and just keep the keys to the car rolling there. But yeah, Ben Johnson, a lot of the offensive minds are going to get thrown here. Joe Brady, Drew Petzing, none of them am I absolutely in love with, but Ben Johnson's the best coordinator of the group, but I don't know if he's a great head coach. Same with any of them.
That's very true. Now, let me say this about Thomas Brown. I don't know that he's a good coordinator either. And he's got way less tangible success to point to. I think that the Bears cannot hire Thomas Brown. You cannot afford to waste Caleb Williams' rookie contract with a guy who doesn't. You got to hire somebody, whether it be a retread head coach with a little bit of success. Look what Dan Quinn's doing this year, or whether it be a coordinator that maybe they haven't been a head coach, but at least they have been a very successful coordinator for quite some time. I think you're playing with fire by hiring a guy like Thomas Brown. No matter how buttoned up he may seem, hiring a guy like Thomas Brown, who has had how many games with the Bears now? 2 games with the Bears. He's going to have the rest of the season, but that's just not a lot of experience and tangible success and results that I can point to. And when you're making, this will be the last decision Ryan Poles makes, if it doesn't go well. He will get fired for botching 2 things. So while Thomas Brown is put on a good face, maybe they have a good ending to the season, and I think he will be a head coach in the NFL someday. I just don't think the Bears can take that risk. You can't pass on a Ben Johnson to go with Thomas Brown. And I think Ben Johnson may be more attracted to the Bears because he knows the division so well. He knows exactly how to attack these defenses, and he's seen them so much. And I think that gives you a head up in the division where the Bears have had so many struggles with teams in the division. So I personally would heavily lean to Ben Johnson if you can get him. And I would be very, very scared, I guess, if they went with Thomas Brown, even though the things that you are saying, I agree with.
I'll give you a real quick, since you mentioned Dan Quinn, a quick Dan Quinn Bears story. They interviewed Dan Quinn in 2022 when they hired Matt Eberflus and flew Dan Quinn to Chicago for an interview, bought him a ticket in coach. And that's part of why Bears fans are concerned that
that's not
Johnson
good.
might not want to come here if they won't even pay up for the plane ticket. Are they going to pay up for Ben Johnson's price tag? Or do you take the nice, cheap interim head coaches in the building for you who doesn't even need a plane ticket?
Yeah, well, I know a little something about a franchise cheaping out. I'll tell you that. So let's hope for Bears fans' sake that even if they do hire Thomas Brown, it's not for that reason that they went with the cheap option. Regardless of what happens, please don't do that to Bears fans. They've been through enough. But with that being said, go ahead.
The pipe dream, since we've talked about the team earlier, is the 49ers want to do a rebuild, and Shanahan says, I don't want to stick around for resetting, so he's just going to resign and leaves the 49ers. That's the pipe dream every single Bears fan is holding on to, and it's never going to happen.
Yeah, man. If the 49ers are dumb enough to get rid of Kyle Shanahan, he will be. Everybody said this about Mike Vrabel, and he didn't even get a job. No, Kyle Shanahan will be hired immediately if San Francisco makes that move. But I don't think they're doing that either. But either way, it will be very interesting to see what the Bears decide to do. And I'm sure that they will have a new head coach within the next 6 to 7 weeks, I would imagine. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. Make sure you check out the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins, who we heard from earlier, the barber himself, stepping into the barber shop as he chops up the best NFL topics. That's going to do it for us today. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed to the Locked On NFL podcast. I am your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, here with my esteemed co-host, Lauren Cox. Thank you guys all for tuning in. And as I tell you every single episode, stay safe out there.